I'm going to share some thoughts from Luke chapter 22. I'm going to start reading in 28. He says, "Ye are they which have continued with me in my temptations." So that word temptations is one of these many English translation words that can help us understand maybe a little bit more than we do, but it can also trap us in a more limited understanding than what was intended. So, when was Jesus tempted? There were times, right? When he was fasting in the wilderness and Satan came to him. But you need to adopt a wider view of this idea of trials or temptations. It's a splitting process. It's a process whereby a catalyst is introduced. It could be very many things. A new situation, new information, new people, a new place, anything. A new commandment, a challenge to an old commandment, a new thought. And then there's a reaction. And what you have to do is respond to this, what is always an invitation to improve. A trial is an invitation to improve. A temptation is an invitation to improve. And so whether you use the word prove or trial or temptation or affliction, there are many, many words that dance around this idea. This idea of a catalyst coming in and then you deciding how you're going to respond to it, and then that induces a split. You are no longer the same person you were before. You're either better or worse. And those are the two choices. There's no third choice to stay the same. To stay the same is always to become worse, right? Because where much is given, much is expected. And if you're trying to stay the same, you're degrading in the face of an opportunity to improve. You can't ignore or reject invitations to improve. You have to take them or you'll get worse. All right, so whose temptations were they? Because he says, "Ye are they which have continued with me in my temptations." You say, well, surely they're the Lord's temptations. He said, "My." Yeah, but it doesn't say whether they were from him or to him. See, you just probably assumed they were to him. And the examples I gave, there were temptations that were to him, but there were also temptations that were from him. You say, whoa. But, in the prayer it says, "Lead me not into temptation." God doesn't tempt us. He proves us, doesn't he? He gives us opportunities to improve all the time. So you have to adopt the wider view of the word, or else you'll be trapped. You won't see it. Did the Lord give the disciples opportunities to be proven? Which isn't like a test where you think you take a test, you get a driver's license kind of thing. But to improve. Did he give them opportunities to improve? He did. It's all over the place. He says to the rich young ruler says, "I've done all these things my whole life. I've kept the commandments." And Jesus says, "Well, what about this one? How about this?" And the guy goes, "Oh man," and he goes away sorrowing because it was new. And he decided to take the downward slope. Instead of going up, he went down, right? So Jesus was saying, you've continued with me in my temptations. You've abided in the vine. Go reread John chapter 10 about the true vine. The vine is the Lord. And the branches, which are supposed to be us, they bear fruit, or we're supposed to. We know from the parable of the sower that not all of us bear fruit. And the ones that do bear fruit, we bear it in different quantities, different types and different quantities. If you don't abide in the vine, if you don't remain with him through the opportunities to improve, you become a dead branch and you are reserved for the burning. What's the burning? The next time something comes along that overcomes you. Jesus says, "Without me, you can do nothing." If you don't abide in the vine, you are dead wood and you will be burned the next time the fire comes through. Even if you do bear fruit, the fruit will be purged. What does that mean? It'll be removed so that you can get better things. Well, that you can improve further. It's not about things. It's about you as a person and becoming more than you are and doing for others more than you currently do. That happened to Job. His fruit was purged. And then in the end, it says he was better off than he was before. That's how the book ends. Okay, that was just verse 28. We're 5 minutes in. 29, and I appoint unto you a kingdom as my Father hath appointed unto me. Well, isn't that interesting? I think I will just keep going. 30, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, I want to tell a little story about this. So one time when I was in the military, actually over a long time in the military, I never got a military driver's license, not even once. The way it works is you get the license, and there are specific qualifiers for different vehicles. Now, it just so happens that I was always doing something else the day we were doing driver's licenses, and because for a span of that time I was an officer, I was usually running other things for other soldiers while we were doing the testing. So I never got a driver's license. And it was funny because at one point I became a company commander, and I had like 120 vehicles in my company that were my legal property. I was signed for them, and I couldn't legally drive any of them. And so I actually had to snag a guy to be my driver. And I would just sit in the passenger seat wherever we'd go, and that was that. But one time we were out in the field, we were doing some field training, and I had to report to my boss, the battalion commander, and because of the training we were doing, my driver was occupied, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And so I needed to be where my boss told me to be, so I hopped in a Humvee and figured out how to drive it and drove up this snowy mountain, which is interesting, to get to my commander, because he was in his tent. He was not going to come down to see me. If I wanted to do what I was supposed to do, I had to drive up to him, right? Because that's the way it works. And so I managed to get there and back without going off-road or destroying anything, which is good because I would have gotten in a lot of trouble. But I think we're past the statute of limitations for whatever crime that was. So what does this have to do with that? I appoint you a kingdom as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, again, back to John chapter 10 and the true vine. I think that's actually not it. It's John 15. I'm sorry, I kept saying John 10. John 10 is the good shepherd, sorry. John 15. So again, we're connecting back to that, pun intended. We're connecting to the true vine. Well, if you want to be a ruler in the Lord's house, you have to go to the Lord's house, right? He says, without me, you're nothing. Now, when I say ruler, I want to be careful. We didn't read this part, but just before this passage, it talks about the Gentiles exercise lordship. How? Well, they control the people. They take from the people. And that's a good reference for John chapter 10, to see what it means to be a shepherd instead of a wolf. The Gentiles, the way to be a leader in the ways of the world is to be a wolf. It's to take from people that have less or are less than you. But in God's kingdom, the way you become a ruler is to serve. You give. You don't take. You give. You always give more than you take. You always operate for the benefit of the world, not the benefit of yourself. The benefit of yourself only matters in as much as it increases the benefit of everyone else. You always do what's best for the world. So, as part of that, you have to learn the Lord's purpose. Again, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. They're not your tribes. It's not your table. It's not your throne. All of that belongs to the Lord. So, if you want to be a part of that, you have to get your butt in a Humvee and drive up the snowy mountain. Because you have to get into his tent. That's where everything happens. So if I hadn't gone to that meeting, I would have had no idea what my boss wanted me to handle for him, because that's the way it works. It rolls down. I would have just been flying on my own. And the whole reason I was there was to figure out what the higher command needed me to do and to find ways to translate that into what I could do and what the people that I was responsible for could do, including my driver, who was off doing something else, right? So now we continue, and this is all connected. Verse 31, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. So, I've talked before about this sifting. Now, if you've never done it, you can look at videos of how grains are harvested. So they're cut down and then the heads are beaten. And the beating is necessary to separate the chaff from the seed, because you can't eat the chaff. The chaff is much lighter than the seed. And so part of this process is winnowing. And when you winnow the chaff, what you do is you pour out the mix of the seed and the chaff that's been beaten. And you subject it to wind or a fan, if you have a fan. And each time you pour it out, more and more of the chaff blows away because it's lighter than the wheat. And the wheat drops straight down and the chaff blows away. You know you're done this process when you dump it and nothing comes out. The result is the same as the input. In other words, the winds don't change the product. So, in life, we have to be beaten. That's the temptations. We have to be subjected to the winds. That's a huge topic, but for now, just think of it as chaos. And as we go through more of life, we're supposed to be refined. We're supposed to become better than we are. So we talked about seeds being planted and coming to fruition and then harvesting. This is a cycle. It's not one thing that happens over life. There is more than one cycle in life. It's supposed to be happening all the time, and it's multidimensional too. It'll make your head spin. But the idea is all just this basic idea of we get the word, we get more invitation for improvement. There's some catalyst. That's the word, that's the seed. And then we choose how we will react to that. And then we either move up or move down. And this is the process. We grow, we're beaten, and then we're subjected to the winnowing. Now, the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But who's doing the sifting? Well, one way you could look at this is that God allows Satan to do the sifting. And that's something you can see in Job. But another way to look at this is that the Lord and the devil each have their own sifting process. Or maybe it'd be even better to think of it as Satan would like to see you turn into chaff. That's going down on the ladder of heaven. He wants you to choose to try to stay the same or to be less than you currently are by turning away from invitations to improve. That's how he gets you. So that's one way to think about this. But then read what the Lord says. He said, I've prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. What does that mean? He's saying, Simon, he's not saying, I have said a prayer and now you have magic power, buddy. You can do anything. You can be anything. You can fly. He's not saying that. He's saying, I have taught you and shown you everything you need to overcome the temptations of Satan. When you decide to do that, strengthen your brethren. When you decide to live up to what I've shown you, help everybody else do the same. This is a powerful passage of Scripture. And so hopefully you understand it a little more than you did before.